Hi, welcome to Comptroller's Corner. I'm your host, Pat Curry, joined as always by Buffalo Comptroller Mark Schroeder. Our top story today, in a scathing new audit released by Comptroller Schroeder, finds that the Erie Basin Marina operator, Brand On Services, cheated taxpayers out of nearly $350,000. For more on this alarming audit, check out this Comptroller's Corner special report. I'm here at the Erie Basin Marina, a popular destination on Buffalo's waterfront, built by the city in 1974. Over the past 2 years, the city has borrowed nearly $2 million for capital improvements at the marina, which includes the Hatch restaurant. To make sure the city was getting the proper return on its investment, Comptroller Schroeder decided to look into the revenue generated by this city asset. His audit found that Brand On Services, the company hired to run the marina, owes the city nearly $350,000 after underpaying its rent in each of the past 5 years. The contract with Brand On Services requires the vendor to pay the city a percentage of revenue generated from sales at the marina for things such as food, gas, and slip rentals. The audit found that more than $164,000 worth of food sales went unreported to the city, and that more than 20,000 gallons of gas is completely unaccounted for. Over the past 4 decades, the city has made some significant investments in the Erie Basin Marina. Now, Mark, you wanted to ensure that taxpayers were getting their money's worth.
Especially because I know the history of this, Patrick. In 1974, this is what I would call a legacy project. It began with then Mayor Stanley Makowski and his vision that there would be public access here at the Erie Basin Marina, but it also would spur development, mixed-use development all around the Erie Basin Marina. And then in 1977, Mayor Jimmy Griffin embraced the Erie Basin Marina. And in my view, this really is the beginning of the great work that Congressman Brian Higgins is doing now around the water's edge. This was the foundation. And so I believe it's very important that we do everything we can to protect the citizens of Buffalo by making sure the vendors who are hired through a process are doing the right thing and giving the correct revenues back to the city of Buffalo.
Now, I mentioned the gas that was unaccounted for. Brand On's fuel supplier told city auditors that it had provided them with 383,000 gallons worth of gas. Yet Brand On told the city that they only sold 363,000.
Yeah.
You want to know what happened to that other 20,000 gallons of gas?
Of course, but it's very telling that the Brand On suppliers told our auditors what the real amount is. And so, therefore, of course, we want to know what happened to the other 20,000 gallons. And there's a lot of implications to that. And so it's an important question. We raised it through the audit, and we believe there are going to be several sources coming forward to be able to help answer, what happened to that missing gasoline.
Now, not only was gasoline missing, but they also underpaid on the gas that they did report to the city. They were supposed to give the city 10% of gas sales. They were only giving the city 10 cents a gallon, which is roughly a quarter what the city was entitled to.
Yeah, this again is very problematic because if you read the contract, it's very clear that the stipulation was 10%. Not 10 cents per gallon. And quite frankly, Patrick, the only authority that can really amend the contract is the Buffalo Common Council. And through our audit process, there is no indication at all that that ever took place.
Now, a similar situation happened with food sales at the Hatch restaurant. $164,000 worth of food sales went completely unreported, and again, the sales that were reported were done at the wrong percentage calculation.
Yeah, this is something that's very, very troubling. There are several areas of revenue sources that come in to the city that were under what we really should be having.
Now, the city is owed nearly $350,000 as a result of this audit. What measures will you be taking to make sure the city gets what's owed to them?
Well, what we've done, we've been very clear. We've been clear in the audit. We've been clear in the press conference that we had last week. that we have an understanding that the Commissioner of Public Works will invoice the vendor, Brand-On Services, for the appropriate amount, and it's approximately $343,000. We feel in the different areas of the audit, having to do with food, having to do with fuel, having to do with all the different aspects, that they underreported and underpaid the city of Buffalo, and we feel that it's very, very important for us to get the money back.
Now, this vendor also operates the City Hall cafeteria and operates a marina for New York Power Authority across the river and Clinton's Dish and Canal Side. What have you done about these other vendor operations this vendor has?
Well, we only have authority, a standing within the city of Buffalo. However, as a courtesy, we have alerted the other entities who have a contract with Brand-On Services that we're troubled by their work. We're troubled by them cheating the citizens of the city of Buffalo, and we wanted to give them a heads up so that they can begin to maybe look at their own books to see if there's anything that's concerning to them.
Now, there might be some potential and possible criminal wrongdoing as a part of this audit. Who else have you alerted to the findings of what your audit department found out?
Yeah, that's a good question. A couple of days ago, I paid a visit to the mayor of the city of Buffalo and suggested that it probably would be a good idea for an investigation with the Attorney General and or the U.S. Attorney General and or the district attorney, or all three. And I asked the mayor if he would like to join me in petitioning those law enforcement agencies to take a look at this audit, and he's agreed. And so we will be sending a letter to the different law enforcement agencies, giving them the audit and some of our concerns in a cover letter signed by me and by the mayor of the city of Buffalo.
Now, this isn't the first audit on the Erie Basin Marina. There were two audits completed before your time as Comptroller, one in 2009 and one in 2005.
Yeah, and that is what's most troubling to me, Patrick, because in 2005, I just would like to read one quote, which was in the audit. Now, this is a previous Comptroller, and it is, quote, "The lack of controls around the register allows for the possibility of understated revenues. Furthermore, the city cannot be sure that is getting the correct share of revenue." So this isn't like this is something that's just happened within the last year or so. And then in 2009, during that audit by a previous Comptroller, quote, the audit said, "As a result of our audit, we have serious concerns regarding the management of the Erie Basin Marina." So in my view, back in 2009, they should have fired them. So we wouldn't be in a situation where they owe $350,000 to the citizens of Buffalo. There's some other things that were in the audit, one of which was changes in the contract without proper approval. And so I mentioned that earlier. The only one who can change anything in a contract is the Common Council. That has not been done. And then finally, in the audit of 2009, it suggested that there were major deficiencies in food, in boat launching, boat slip rentals, fuel sales, and maintaining an up-to-date slip renter's registration. I mean, what else is there? So that means everything that they were doing was deficient. So what does that mean? Fire them. And so I think because of this audit, we have been successful, and that the city administration is saying they are going through an RFP process immediately to find a new vendor, perhaps vendors, 2 or 3 vendors.
One to operate the fuel sales, one to operate the restaurant, and one to operate the marina, for instance.
Absolutely. And then finally, so what lesson do I learn from the audit of 2005? What lesson do I learn as Comptroller of the City of Buffalo from the audit of 2009? The lesson I learned, this will never happen again. I have instituted in the Comptroller's office what I call anniversary audits. That means every year, on the anniversary date of the audit that we've done, we are going to check, and we are going to go back to whoever the source is, whether it's the Commissioner of Public Works, whether it's the Common Council, to say, hey, listen, you have the power to do something here, or whether it's writing a press release and letting everybody know that there's no progress made, and the audit report that we did is sitting in a bookcase somewhere. We're not going to allow it. We're not going to be in a situation where 4 or 5 years later we're coming back and we say, oh, woe is us, we're owed $353,000. We've got a responsibility to do something about it, and we will, starting now.
And you're not even waiting for the first anniversary. You're already looking into some suspicious overtime. Now, the operator of Brandon, the operations director, is a former city employee. His wife is the president of Brandon. Their son is a current Department of Public Works employee. Last year, he made more than $42,000 worth of overtime. And this year, in only 9 months, he's already going to eclipse that because he's already got $36,000 in overtime in just 9 months. Yeah. Your office is looking into this, and you've requested timesheets for his work, both in the city of Buffalo and to see if he's had a role with Brandon Services here at the marina.
Yeah, that's precisely correct. And so, overtime isn't really central. Overtime pay isn't really central to this audit. And unfortunately, overtime is a reality in many municipalities, just not Buffalo. But what is concerning to me is that if an employee is making so much overtime, working a job in the city, but also allegedly is an employee of the vendor, through the relationship of his parents, that is troubling to me because there's only so much time in the day. And so one of the reasons why we're asking for timesheets from both the city of Buffalo and from Brandon Services to see if there is any situation where the citizens of Buffalo are getting a no-show for work each day because he may have responsibilities with the Erie Basin Marina. Timesheets would tell. I suspect, Patrick, that Brandon Services is going to take the letter that we wrote, probably crumble it up a little bit, either throw it in a garbage can or give it to their attorney. That is the reason why we have decided to get involved law enforcement agencies so that they can kind of look at everything and they can make their own decisions, and then I can assure them and assure the public that myself as Comptroller of the City of Buffalo, and the mayor has assured me as well, that we will do everything we can to give the information to the law enforcement agencies as they ask for it.
Now, when you first became Comptroller, you were required to submit an audit plan to the Common Council. In that audit plan, you said you're going to be looking at sources of revenue and expenditures. Really, this audit encapsulates both because of the city's significant investment into this Erie Basin Marina with nearly $2 million in capital expenditures, and also the revenue generated by the Erie Basin Marina, which apparently, as from this audit, is not enough revenue.
Right. That's exactly right. And going back to the prelude when we first started, and I talked about the legacy project of Mayor Mikowski and Mayor Griffin. Back in those days, in 1974, the mayors infused $9 million initially and then more money. And then, of course, you referenced that $2 million just recently is going into renovating the hatch. That's a lot of money on the expenditure side. On the revenue side, when they are shortchanging us, that's a real concern. And I think what this is now, this is a message to all vendors who are operating, whether in the city limits or beyond, or within the other jurisdictions of the New York Power Authority or the Canal Corporation, that they had better be honest, they had better work by the book, they better incorporate best practices, or people like me, controllers and others, are going to begin to investigate, because this is our responsibility to make sure that the citizens of Buffalo get the revenues they deserve for their waterfront.
As you can see, there are some very troubling things going on down at the Erie Basin Marina. One thing that we didn't touch on in the segment, the special report, was that certain work was done, over $200,000, that was not authorized and improperly deducted from the rent owed to the city. These sort of things were not approved by the Common Council, which was a requirement of the agreement.
Right, and this is the reason why we're going to take responsibility now, because we've been controller for the last 20 months, and soon, I believe this week, the Finance Committee of the Buffalo Common Council will be meeting, and we will be present at that committee meeting, and we will be very clear, because there are certain times where you have different council members and they may not understand what the total responsibility is in this particular case, that the council, the Buffalo City Council, really are the only ones who can amend the contract that was created by the city along with the law department and then agreed to by the vendor. So if you want to amend it, there's a mechanism to do it, and that is with the input and a vote of the Common Council. That clearly did not happen over the period of time that we did this audit.
And the operator, Brandon, went to Common Council for other changes in the contract, so he knew how to do it. He just didn't do it in this case, and instead tried to deduct it from the rent, which is unauthorized and not part of the agreement.
Exactly, and you know what? We're not asleep. We're not asleep at the wheel. And so when we look into things, we have a professional audit department, and we are going to probe properly, identify certain findings, come up with remedies and recommendations, and as I've said countless times, we have created now what I call anniversary audits. This is not just going to go in a bookcase. We are going to continue to look at it.
And as you mentioned before in the special report, you're not waiting for the first anniversary. This is something you're following, and with every day there seems to be new revelations about this, and you're going to follow up on every single lead that comes across your desk.
We are, and we will.
Switching gears a little bit, there was recently 40 or so promotions made in the fire department, and some media outlets took a look in your role in kind of moving this thing along. With the payroll certification issue, Art Voice and the Buffalo News looked into this, and some people are giving you credit for kind of moving this process along and getting these promotions made on a permanent basis.
Yeah, and certainly we appreciate that, but it's real simple and it's real clear to me. I don't really make judgments. So when things get to the Comptroller's office, I'm looking at certain things that could be maybe miscommunication, or it could be a strategy on part of the administration. If it isn't crystal clear in terms of what our responsibilities are, then I'm going to bounce it back to the proper channel. And also, I'm publicly elected and not shy. And certainly I'm going to tell the media who are interested in these types of things what I feel is happening. And when they report it, they were very, very clear that this fire promotion situation was hanging around for nearly 2 years. And as you mentioned, without getting this complicated, there were some payroll certification situations that we have a standing in. And so that really was the linchpin for the administration making those promotions, in my view.
And you contacted the State Civil Service Department and the commissioner there just to look at what the city was doing and try to find a solution that would get the payroll issue on the right track.
Yeah, and that really wasn't only because of some of the things we just talked about having to do with firefighters, but it also dates back to last December when there was payroll certification problems on some workers from Department of Public Works. And the Corporation Council made an opinion. We thought it was fine. But then when the situation didn't resolve itself, that's when I took it upon the Comptroller's office to reach out to a third party, and that would be the Commissioner of New York State Civil Service. And I also believe that's one of the reasons why this is now resolved, because we went for another opinion, which could still be coming. Even though the administration made the decision to do the right thing. It took them a while, but they did it. But the Civil Service State Commission now is aware of some of the concerns that I have, and probably will be responding.
Speaking of the fire department, They recently got their retroactive pay as a part of their new contract. And as soon as you get the information from the administration, you can get the police retroactive pay from the arbitration award out the door as soon as possible. And as soon as you can get that information, you'll be processing those checks immediately.
Yeah, the retro pay for the Buffalo firefighters has already taken place. It's already been executed. And for the police, it is close. It should have been, in September. It now appears that it won't be until October. And again, we weren't quiet about that. We were very clear that the arbitration award, or it's called a PERB award, was clear that the city of Buffalo must do A, B, C, and D, having to do it retro pay within 60 days. And we, in the Comptroller's office, made it very clear that that wasn't going to happen because the administration has the responsibility to get the detailed information to whom is involved and to get it to MIS, which is Information
IT
Services
department for the city,
which reports to the administration.
Correct.
And we knew and made it very clear that they did not receive that in a timely fashion. Therefore, the city was really in violation of the PERB award, which is unfortunate. And so now I believe there is a rescheduling and the information has been sent to IT, and it appears now that the date that I'm told, and I check on it periodically, is October 13th. So we're getting close. So many of those things will be done soon.
Now I want to talk a little bit about the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, as it's known. More than a year ago, you were told by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development that the city of Buffalo would have a new role in the disbursement of federal housing grants.
Yeah.
And formerly, the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency, BURA, as it's called, used to administer these programs completely. And in the past year or so, your office has been involved because basically the federal government said the city has to be involved because the checks and balances that are in the city charter, like a common council and a comptroller that are independently elected and watch over the expense of this funds. So recently, there was some emergency rehab loans. You've been asking from Bureau for information to process these loans for low to moderate income people to get new roofs on their houses so they can stay in their home. And after a whole summer of not really receiving any applications, your office got flooded with over 50, almost 50 in just 2 business days. Now your office, the process only takes a day or two, and they're working diligently on getting these housing loans approved and getting the contractors out. But you're a little frustrated that it's taken this long, and that when action was, it was all at once.
Yeah. So let me just make a couple of comments to where you started, and you said it, Patrick, in a very professional way. But let me add a little color commentary. The way that I explain this to people is that HUD sent a Dear John letter, and the Dear John letter went to Bureau saying that they want to break up and that things need to be transferred over to the city. And because I'm conversant with the Buffalo City Charter, when I'm reading this Dear John letter that wasn't sent to me but was sent to the mayor of the city of Buffalo last June 22nd, 2012, it became very clear to me that the Comptroller's office was going to be involved intimately in the fiduciary end of HUD and Bureau. And so at that point in time, we did something about it. We wanted to set ourselves up for success. We have within our audit department a HUD division, 3 employees. 2 of the 3 are CPAs, and so we mean business. And so when certain things come to us, like 50 applications in 2 business days, when we've asked them, the city, and we've asked Bureau not to do that, and they do it anyways, that is frustrating to me, but there are certain things that I can say and do, and I will over the next month to prevent that from happening again.
And just to recap some of this, the last draw for the emergency rehab program was last year in August. From August 2012 to June, there was 0 applications processed by Bureau. June, we had 2 forwarded to our office, and from June till just last week, we had 0 all summer long, and then 50 at the last minute.
And listen, let's just make this clear so that our constituents understand. You know, we're not belly aching. You know, when the applications come in, they come in, and we'll do our best, regardless of if they're 2 or 50. But the fact is, there are 2 media outlets who are going to the people who are most vulnerable in our community and asking them about the delay in the application process, and that they haven't been able to have a contractor come and do their roofing or things associated with roofing and leaks and those types of things. And these are the real people who are being interviewed each and every day by the media outlet. This is what happens when things aren't done in a professional, comprehensive, expedient way. When we get things in the Comptroller's office, whether it's HUD related, Bureau related, doesn't matter what it is, we have certain standards, we make sure it matches the standards that we have, and then we execute immediately. There's never a holdup in the Comptroller's office.
And it's these people have been waiting for years often, and they've been approved. And it's interesting that the money that's been allocated for this, that the 50 applications that you received, were allocated in 2009 and 2010. So they're behind the 8 ball in processing this loan, and they have to make market improvement in order to get this money out the door.
In my opinion, there's really no excuse. And there was frozen funds in 2012. But as you pointed out, in 2009, 2010, there weren't, and this should have been executed. It wasn't, and it's problematic. And quite frankly, I really don't see a solution. I don't see things really changing on the programmatic side of it. And so, therefore, over the next several weeks and months, we'll be able to share, with our viewers what some of our ideas are to make sure that this is done in the right way, so it's expedited, so that people can count on these federal funds, which are the people's money anyways.
Right. Now, Mark, we just have a minute left, but I understand that it's Deaf Awareness Week. You're very active with St. Mary's School for the Deaf, and in fact, you can sign.
Yeah, well, many years ago, I worked at St. Mary's School for the Deaf in Buffalo, and many who are deaf can tell that I am rusty, and I also use old signs sometimes because I am old. And but this has been Deaf Awareness Week, and it was a tremendous event that began yesterday at the Walden Galleria Mall. Steve Lovey, who's the Executive Director of Deaf Adult Services, did a wonderful job. The deaf community was out there, and over the next couple of weeks, Patrick, they are going to have singers and sign language for Buffalo Sabre games and for the Buffalo Bills. So it's exposure for the deaf community, and I'm interested in that mostly because there's an unemployment problem within the deaf community, and so the more exposure you can give them, the better it's going to be.
And the technological advances have really improved the outlook for deaf people trying to get employment, as you mentioned.
There's no question about it. And one of the things I said yesterday in a very nice way, I said I've been in City Hall now for 22 months. I've never seen a deaf person who works for the city. And so I'm going to take it part of my responsibility, and I know the mayor will too, because Delia Cadle was there representing him yesterday, and she said that she would say that to the mayor, that over the next year we want to be able to see if there's an opportunity to hire qualified deaf people who live in the city of Buffalo to work in City Hall.
Well, Mark, that about sums it up. We ran out of time this week. Thanks for joining us.
Okay.
And thank you at home for joining us on the Comptroller's Corner. This is Pat Curry signing off.